So that was interesting. I've never had this happen before. About half an hour ago, I tried to go live and talk about a massive, massive issue that's facing the Pacific Islands, and Facebook did not let people come on and join it. It only got to about 80 people and then it just all dropped off, which I've never had before on any live ever. I've had it not start a few times, but I've never had that happen where it just dropped off completely ever. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know what Facebook's trying to do or why they're trying to cull people and stop people from watching what's really going on. But they're obviously trying to play with the amount of people that this message will get out to. And to be honest, at this point, I've just gotten so used to it that I'm going to roll with it. I'm going to put out this message anyway. And if they try and stop it again, please go and watch my Instagram, because on Instagram, I've managed to go live and I managed to do all the full details on Instagram. So if this feed drops out again, if Facebook tries to stop me from talking about this again, go onto my Instagram and see it there, because everything's up on there. So what I want to talk about is currently, someone wants to try and join. No, sorry. Currently over in Tokelau, there are multiple families being held against their will under house arrest. The government have held some of these families under house arrest for nearly a year. I thought this was a joke when I first heard it. I genuinely did. I genuinely thought it was a joke. And if you guys can hear me, please let me know, because I've never we've less than 60 people and I've never had that before in my life. So Facebook's obviously playing with the algorithms when it comes to lives. These people that are being held under house arrest have done nothing wrong. And I don't say that lightly, nothing wrong whatsoever. They just decided that they didn't want to take the jab. And so one of them in Nokunonu, the local council, has recently sent them a letter and told them that they're trying to decide whether or not they're going to allow them to buy credit to make phone calls and to get internet, because they're upset that they've started speaking out and saying that they now want to be released. Isn't this absolutely insane? How on earth can they hold these families without their consent, against their will, when there is no COVID on the island? One of these families is a police sergeant. She's got a photo with Jacinda Ardern, which I'll pop up once this live is done. Now, what does this mean for these families? You've got two different atolls. You've got Tafu and Nokunonu that have got families that are being held without consent and against their will. Now, at Tafu, they've recently been let off house arrest. But what that actually means is they're still not allowed to go into public spaces. They're still not allowed to go to the shops. They're only allowed to go outside of their property to gather food. That still sounds like house arrest to me. Actually, I'm sure a lot of our prisoners get easier house arrest than that. On the other island in Nokunonu, that's where the family are not even allowed to speak out. They're trying to silence them from having internet, from phone calls. Now, I recently did a TikTok video and I put out of one of the young girls talking about this. And after that, people tried to set her house on fire. They put fires around the house and they threw massive big rocks, like boulder rocks, at the property. This is dangerous for this family to keep being held under house arrest. But what can you do about it? One of the families in Atafu is a nurse. Her and her husband both got double jabbed and she got boosted. Now, she was pregnant when she got boosted and then she miscarried. Now, I'm not saying there's a correlation, but she was just worried enough that there might have been, that she decided not to get the second jab, not to give the second one to her children. And because of that, the whole family are under house arrest. This is not health measures. You don't stop people from using the internet for a health measure. You stop them from using the internet if you want to control them and if you want to dictate to them. So if you're sitting at home are thinking the way that I do, where I think this is so deeply wrong and we're living in such a corrupt society, please, I need you to actually physically help this family. And how you can do it is by ringing your MP's office, by going down there and visiting them in person, writing letters, anything you can do to pressure our local MPs into helping this family. Because the majority of people that live in Tokelau are actually New Zealand citizens. It's not a sovereign nation. It's actually part of New Zealand. Falls under New Zealand law. They've got their own government. They want to be independent, but they're not yet. So by you pressuring your MPs, this family can become free. Now, we're using the hashtag free Tokelau. So if you share it, if you put up photos, if you talk about it, please use that hashtag just so we can show how many people are actually behind this family. If you can share this video or share the one, I think Daily Examiner have done some videos, some interviews with the families themselves. I've done some with the families. It's just really, really difficult to try and actually get interviews done because the internet connection is so bad that it cuts out all the time. So it's really, really hard to try and get hold of the families, although we have spoken. I've spoken with another lady called Say today. So she used to work in government in Tokelau. So we have a nurse, a police sergeant, and an ex-government official all being held under house arrest. If you can help, please do. Even if it's just a little thing, because this is a human rights abuse. This is completely wrong. And us as people, as human beings, should stand up to it. Last time I did a video, I had one of the government ministers, her family started messaging me and trying to pressure me to take the videos down. And then they called me a white supremacist. And you know the funny thing? I didn't even think about the color of anyone's skin. I just thought we've got human beings that are under house arrest and that's wrong. The fact that they try and make it a race thing is only because that's how they can justify holding a family down without their consent. This is absolutely atrocious, and I really hope you guys help me to fight this. I'm going to be trying to get the interview together tonight to put up for you guys with the lovely Say, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to keep pressuring the government. I hope you guys keep pressuring the government. All we can do is try and create positive change for these lovely, hardworking people that are being held against their will. There's also a lot of children that are being held as well. So think about the social and mental impacts on these young children, some as young as 5 and even younger, that are not even allowed to go and play with their friends. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being wonderful people who genuinely care about others. And let's see if we can try and work together to get this family freed.
Kia ora, kia ora, kia ora e te whānau. So I had to share Chantal Baker's kōrero. And some months ago, I interviewed Manalino, one of the whānau, who was under...
I want to welcome into the platform studio now someone who was invited in last week.
Sorry. My gadgets do their own thing. So I wanted to share that because it's important. I've done an interview of one of the whānau members that are on in-house arrest over in the Tokelau Islands, and Chantal has done her bit, and Liz Gunn has done her bit. And here's the thing: so mainstream media hasn't picked up on it, and you know there are just major concerns that this sort of abuse, this abuse of power. Remember, the administrator for Tokelau is Jacinda Ardern's father. Jacinda Ardern's father is Ross Ardern. I also remember Ross Ardern was part of the Dawn raids, and Intel tells me he was also part of what happened down in Wellington with our occupation. So they don't care, so much for kindness sake. They don't care about us, about New Zealand citizens, because Tokelau is still part of our country. They're New Zealand citizens. Their human rights are being breached. So if there are any lawyers out there that can support these whānau, I'm sure Chantal Baker has contacts, and I've put some of the contacts up on in the descriptor as well, and who I've put emails up of politicians as well. So that's that part. I also now want to show another clip of an interview with Dr. Matt Shelton. It was done with the platform today. Now it's quite a long video, but it's a must watch, okay? Because the platform's becoming my favorite media outlet. Actually, they're doing the job of mainstream media. And if you look at the issues around nepotism and conflicts of interest with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and her whānau, I don't know if you saw on Q&A. Now, absolutely, we need to hold our ministers to account, and she stated that. However, what was very clever about the Q&A interview is that the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, and I've said, I will not support racists or racism, and she's been attacked personally, and I will not tolerate that, and I will defend her as a wahine Māori and as a politician, because if we expect to be treated right, we have to treat others with respect as well. Yes, we target the issues. Yes, we hold them accountable, but do not make it personal. And she has been trolled. And there have been keyboard warriors. But there's like the media outlet, the platform, myself, and other media outlets and other reporters who will hold them accountable. Not face to face, but we're out there. We're not hiding behind fake profiles and all of that kaka. For me, I try and target the issues, but she is the incumbent, and she is the one that I've gone up against in previous elections. So let's keep it respectful, whānau? And that's all I ask. You do what I'm a born advocate, and I can negotiate hard. I'm in that space now where I've lost one of the most precious things to my heart, my papa, and so I'm out for political utu, is how I call it. Hey, I'm out for political revenge, and I want to hold people accountable. And even though Nanaia may not have pulled the trigger, she certainly was part and parcel of loading that treatment. And it's not just my father that's lost his life because he was vaccine injured, but many whānau have lost their lives. And I'm going to fight tooth and nail. He's given me the desire, the urgency, the motivation to see justice be done for him and for many, many whānau out there. And more people are contacting me personally and saying, I've experienced the same as your dad. So I am that mouthpiece. And if you want to, I will interview you if you've been through similar experience, and I don't wish that upon my worst enemy, to be honest. But accountability, absolutely. So I'm going to share this interview with the platform as well, and it's quite a long interview. It's 54 minutes. So whānau, if you haven't got time tonight to watch it, kei te pai, the beauty about my lives is you can come back in your own time. But if you want to watch it, I'm going to play it now. Okay? I'm going to mute myself and then I'll share. Kia ora ra.
And things have happened since then, and we all know about that. And that is Dr. Matt Shelton, who's with us. Thank you for coming in, Dr. Shelton. Good to see you.
G'day, Paul. Thanks for having me.
You are here. You were invited. You are here. Many people will know your name, and ears are pricking up right now. But for those who may not know who you are you? What have you been doing in your career up till recently, and what have you been doing since? Just a quick painting of the picture, if you don't mind.
Sure, Paul. Well, I've been a doctor for 37 years. I've been in New Zealand for 24 or so. Most of my time in general practice, primary care, and up until last year, I was a GP at Plympton. And me and a number of other doctors, a handful of people had already been posting on social media some concerns and some thoughts we had around the pandemic and its management. And then I got suspended subsequently by the Medical Council. And then I won in court and won the right to be reinstated. And the Medical Council promptly re-suspended me again. And then my practicing certificate has subsequently lapsed. And there's one or two barriers to getting it back again at the moment. So technically I'm not I'm not able to practice as a doctor. I can still call myself a doctor. I have a medical degree.
Right.
It was a hard one. So for the last year or so, I've been involved with NZDSOS, which is a collection of doctors who got together early on and really just asked questions. We just asked questions and raised concerns. Given the strength of the narrative, the apparent confidence of the safe and effective message that we felt already back then there was no certainty, and it wasn't possible to make these blanket statements. So we just wrote a couple of letters, really asking questions, and were met with complete and utter silence from the government, from the Medical Council, from the GP College, from MedSafe, complete silence, and that's been the playbook really. So we knew immediately that A, we were in trouble, and B, this was probably going to be worse than we actually thought.
How many patients have you seen? I'm trying to get an idea of the sort of experience you've had and how you're able to discern over a period of a career, and thousands of patients consultations?
Oh yes. Every now and then we sort of I'm sure we all do a back of an envelope, totting up calculation, but it's tens of thousands.
So you've seen
by now
a huge variety of people with everything under the sun that a GP.
Yeah, I've worked full time pretty much most of my career. I've been consecutively registered every year since I graduated in '85. So I'm as experienced really as anybody else my age, for sure.
Because doctors like you have been kind of marginalised, demonised even. So what was the problem you had early on? Go through that. What rang the alarm bells in you? Well,
we've got mileage on the tracks. Many of us founding doctors were pretty experienced. We've had lots join us since then. And we're all in agreement that what's going on is completely unprecedented in terms of the rush job, really, of the vaccine rollout, the lack of any significant safety testing, any human trials. 2 months and that was it in humans. And they said, 95% effective and safest vaccine has ever been. And time has told, clearly everybody's getting COVID. The vaccine has not been effective. And that was one of the questions we asked at the beginning. And it's very cold comfort to look back at those letters and to see that every single concern and question that we asked, as far as we're concerned, was valid and has been shown to have been a really important question to ask. And the answers, are not great.
Perhaps people struggle with trying to work out why, over the history of medicinal drugs and the testing regimes that, no one's an expert, but people assumed took place and probably did. I don't know about medical history too much, but, things were tested and proven to have a certain level of safety. Number one, obviously effectiveness in treating whatever. Why was all that suspended for this?
Panic. The world was panicking. We were all told this was going to be a disaster, very high mortality rate. We were all told initially it looked like maybe 3 or 4%. The world essentially said to the drug industry, help. And the drug industry said, well, fine, we can help, but there'll be no safety testing. And you'll need to, give us a liability waiver in case things go wrong. And the world said, sure, where do we sign?
That's insane.
Well, a lot about, it feels like society's insane to some extent. It is, because very quickly it became clear that actually the fatality rate was much, much lower than the initial projections. The WHO and some very well-known epidemiologists, statisticians came out and said, look, it's looking like a typical seasonal flu, actually. But by then it seemed like the juggernaut was accelerating.
Yeah, I remember that, finding out or it becoming apparent that it's not as serious as the first comments made about this disease. It wasn't long before people were saying, hey, it's not that bad, here are the numbers. But that didn't seem to stop anything or slow anything down. And that was early on.
It didn't, and as time goes on...
Can you explain that?
Well, as time goes on, there's some good evidence that points to a degree of pre-planning and foreknowledge, and the platform of the vaccine was certainly ready to go. And I do need to remind people, though, that I'm currently not registered as a doctor, but I was when all this came out, and my views are obviously more violently disputed by the Medical Council, but I'm still entitled to them. They have their views, I have mine, and we have ours. But look, I have to say, one of the things they've said all along, and more recently they've said it in court and in writing, is that they don't have to challenge or test our medical evidence. They don't have to produce evidence in support of what they say. Essentially, we need to toe the line.
How do you run that argument?
Well, that's very hard. And in fact, judges have said the same thing. They are saying in some of the court cases, look, we're being given two parallel streams of evidence, and the Crown will not engage with the expert evidence that's being brought. So what are we to do? And generally what they're doing is defaulting to the Crown and the Crown's experts, and it's the same old sort of talking heads that we keep hearing. So there's been a lot about this that has stuck out like a sore thumb to me and many others. Not just the unparalleled lack of testing and lack of knowledge around the short, medium, and long-term possible problems of this vaccine, but the fact that we're supposed to swallow this and we're not supposed to say anything that would dispute the government narrative. We're supposed to stop doing what we've all done all our careers, and which we've been threatened, if we don't do, which is to have informed discussions with our patients and to, as best as possible, get their fully informed agreement as to what treatment program or course of treatment they'd like to undergo. Because a very important precept of ethical medicine also is that you always have the option of declining and choosing not to do anything. And yet we've seen this unparalleled situation, this atmosphere of force and coercion, and some people have literally felt tortured into doing something that they wouldn't ordinarily do because their circumstances, they're so reliant on their income, pay their mortgage, they love their jobs, and some have walked and are paying that price too.
Although the strong ones, I would imagine, when you've got a lot of at stake.
Everybody's circumstances are unique and different, but it's been a one-size-fits-all, approach and pressure.
You're a slave to the conditions like mortgages and futures and paying for kids' education. It's a lot to put at stake. So surely the experts, what do you think of that word experts now, by the way?
It's a very loaded word, isn't it? It's so subjective. So subjective.
But it's used a lot and it's kind of part of the messaging. I mean, I don't know anything about medicine, and I've been watching this very closely. I was involved in the news side of it early on when I was at RNZ and the whole thing was rolling out. And I'm not the brightest spark around, but I could see where this could go with the speed at which it was moving. And like you say, the common sense, the lack of common sense in testing and doing the due diligence, I don't know what the term is, before you put this at mass, 95% of the population, mass scale on a population. We're not the only ones. But you put your foot on the gas. You must have thought about the psychology of that. The experts, the best brains in the room. It's obvious. I could have rocked up and told them that. Hey, watch out for this. This could be a problem. What's happened, do you think, to these decision makers, to these experts? Have they been possessed by this?
I think that's a very good way of putting it. I think a lot of them were scared witless at the beginning and, bought into this whole idea that we've got to do something fast. And if we don't do something now, we could be really badly criticized. But it was only a couple of months into the thing that it became clear, actually, that we had, misgauged the severity of the illness.
That was the point I made before. It was pretty soon that people were realising it, way in time to put the brakes on.
But then, contracts have been signed. In fact, deals were done even before Pfizer, for instance, even had a product, as far as we knew. The government had signed away, had given them freedom from liability. I don't know what the financial deals were and what the clauses were in the contract, because nobody's been able to find out. Certainly not in New Zealand anyway. But the government's behaved as if it's not allowed to do its own independent testing, because we've raised lots of issues around safety and the sort of the purity of the products and things, and they've just consistently refused to engage, to even have a look. So I mean, all that information evidence has been with the police, it's been with the MedSafe. We've written over and over, and there's really not much more we can do in the face of these institutions, as far as we can tell, refusing to do their jobs. They're there to regulate and protect the public good. So nobody's disputed most of what we've said. There's just been a silence and a refusal to debate and to engage.
And that's what we're doing right now. I remember getting a call from my medical centre early on in this, and it was like chasing me up to get vaccinated. And I said to the very nice woman on the phone, nurse or whatever, I said, "Can you tell me what's in it?" Couldn't. Didn't have a clue. I said, "Has there been adequate testing of it?" "Oh, yeah. Yeah, MedSafe's approved it." I knew that wasn't the case. And I said, "From the information you can give me, do you think I can achieve informed consent?" Basically hung up the phone at that point. Them, not me. Wow.
Not a perfect world, is it?
But, people are entitled to have those questions answered faced with a decision like that, surely.
Well, in a normal world.
Normal world. Why? It suddenly went not normal.
Well, there are obviously explanations somewhere. And I wouldn't claim to be an expert in a lot of that. But I do feel I have a right to my view on the science and what's normal. And there have been a few high-profile disasters with drugs along the way. I mean, I narrowly avoided having my mother take thalidomide, for instance.
Right.
But most people who took thalidomide didn't get the dreadful congenital abnormalities.
Yeah.
It took about 5 years of its use before it dawned on people.
The numbers were obvious.
That actually the numbers were increasing.
Yeah.
So it was relatively rare, but it was catastrophic if it was you or your child. And there'd been normal length clinical trials for the time. Vioxx is another one more recently, very effective anti-inflammatory. And eventually it emerged that the drug company was sitting on data that it knew showed that it wasn't nearly as safe as the clinical trials seemed to presume or seemed to show. And you get that. And quite a long time for some teaching I was doing, at the time, it was clear that around about 20% of all medications that are released onto the market in the Western world are withdrawn in their first year of life.
Wow.
Because they're shown to be more harmful or less effective, or both, than the clinical trials seem to suggest. So, they're not the last word. And it's not until you get what's called the post-marketing data, where the drug companies are following up, and ideally the regulatory authorities are as well, what's happening in real world, full market use, that problems may apply. And it was very clear with our product here, the Pfizer one, that Pfizer knew about problems, within 3 months of the first rollout and its use in the UK and the States, that there were big problems. But we only just heard about that, last year. It wasn't made clear. But certainly the regulators would have had it. We know that Public Health Victoria had that information. We're almost certain that MedSafe did.
So, hang on. You've got that information, yet you've still got your foot hard on the gas.
Seems to be what's happened, doesn't it? And you'd have to ask these people for the reasons.
Well, no one gets an opportunity
because we've been asking, and
no one will tell you. And the media doesn't ask, and we'll get onto that at some point in our discussion, I hope. I want to get back to this waiving of liability. You never do that in a business transaction. That is the outlier. That's not the normal. And another thing too, to go with that, is that I think a while back there was a leak of how much the government was paying per dose. Someone leaked it out, $36 or something. And the response from Christopher Hipkins at the time, he might have said more, but this is what I saw quoted. The only concern he seemed to have was Pfizer might be upset with us.
Mm.
So, putting the piece parts together, I mean, why would he be worried about?
Well, he knows what's in the contract.
He's the customer. Customer's always right. We're paying the money. I mean, it seems like an unnatural business relationship.
Well, if you remember, there was huge fear around whether we'd be, where we'd be in the queue to get a vaccine. And even calling it a vaccine is really explains so much of what's happened.
Could you define, is it actually in the classic definition a vaccine?
Well, no, it's not. You can define it a number of ways and it doesn't meet the grade, but by labeling this a vaccine, it gets a shoe-in with people who are used to using safe and effective vaccines. And I mean, people might choose to call me an anti-vaxxer, but I've been vaccinating my whole life. I've given way more injections, I'm sure, than the chairman of the medical council and some of the doctors in the Ministry of Health who don't actually see patients.
Yeah, that's why I asked you first up how many patients you've seen over the time, and I was going to at some point get to, but now you've mentioned it. Do these people have any real world experience?
I don't think so. I mean, to get to be a public health specialist or an epidemiologist, it's about learning the topic and doing research, and you may be involved in a bit of clinical trials here and there, but you don't actually consult one-to-one with patients day in, day out. So I think they do lose some of the nuance and
there's a lot of nuance
and the sense of the individuality and the uniqueness of the person you've got in front of you, and also the reality of the situation for them. If they make a decision that goes badly. But if I could just reverse back a little bit, the other thing that labeling it in a vaccine does is it can give us a false sense of assurance. Oh, it's just a vaccine. More vaccines are all
because people are used to vaccines.
But it doesn't work as a vaccine. It does not stop you being able to contract the illness, COVID-19. It doesn't stop you being able to pass it on to other people. And in fact, there's very good data, including the government's own official data, and from many countries overseas, especially that are heavily vaccinated, that actually the opposite is true. It may well make you more likely to go down with COVID. And that's going to say that's pretty strong evidence.
Because look at our country.
And look at what your actual statistical reduction in risk from that first clinical trial with 40,000 people in it. And it actually came in at less than 1%. Because there were a large number of people who didn't get COVID in that trial. So the best that you could say was that I think it was 0.84%. And this is one thing that's been done for years, modelling what's called relative risk reduction and actual risk reduction. Because you've got to look at the number of people who are destined to get this infection in the first place. And it varies from year to year with influenza, for instance. The flu jab varies between sort of just under 20% and maybe 50% in a great year, reduction in risk. But that's relative risk because most people aren't destined to get the flu in any particular flu season anyway, or at least a majority won't. So you can do what you want. There's a saying, you can torture statistics until they tell you anything that you want. But so right from the word go, that trial, if you looked at it properly, was waving red flags all over the place.
So it was sold as 95% effective first up. I think Joe Biden said, you take this, though he doesn't know what he's saying, it's obvious. If you take this, you won't get it. He said that verbatim. I've seen it, unless it's an AI'd picture. That's what he said.
No, he did.
Then,
and he's not the only one either.
Then when it became clear, because we're slightly behind the timeline on the rest of the world, and that was that supply thing that you talked about before, then it started to come through that no, it doesn't actually protect you. It doesn't stop you from getting it. Or if it does, it's a very small number, it seems, and I think we can safely say that it's quite widespread. It's failure in doing that. Not only that, that it would be good for the virus going forward, and we've had variants since then, which I take it the current one isn't. I think it's a computer design piece of code, isn't it? Fundamentally, the mRNA.
Well, the sequenced code that was supposedly from the COVID-19 virus, which has never, to my knowledge, actually been identified or isolated anywhere yet, and that's just the truth, was uploaded by the Chinese.
Yeah.
And they said, here's the code, and do your worst.
Yeah, and they got on the PC, made the molecules or whatever, and outputted the product.
Yeah, and it turned out it wasn't actually the full code. It was a best guess, and they stuck some other bits in that they thought would probably be where,
just
a bit of this and a bit of that.
Throw this in. And so it moved from that sort of almost categorical reassurance that you take this, you won't get it. Then it was modified to prevent severe hospitalizations and illness, or severe illness and hospitalizations. That should have rung bells, shouldn't it? That modification of the sales pitch.
Yeah, well, it's been a sort of slippery slope.
But people quote that now, like,
well, it seems to me it's the last thing they've got to hang on to. And I mean, and you've had guests in here that have said, look, you're 10 times more likely to die if you're unvaccinated. And it's become very clear how they can say that now.
Well, how do they say it? How can they?
Well, it's how you define what vaccinated means. I mean, if you're looking at safety, it ought to mean the moment the first jab goes into your arm,
right,
the clock starts ticking, and you should be watched like a hawk.
Are there other vaccines with multiple stages? I know you get your booster for tetanus or something. If you step on a nail, it was 10 years ago. But I'm sorry to jump in on there, but are there vaccines in the past where it requires, it's flu vaccine, I suppose, multiple stages ongoing?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the childhood vaccinations, the ones you have in the first year of life.
Of course.
You have typically 3 doses are required and then a booster. So that's we're used to that, and that's usually may take a couple of goes to generate a sustained immune response. But again, we have to come back to the fact this isn't a traditional vaccine. It's never been used to raise immunity to infectious agent before, and you can quibble all you like, but the fact is this is an experiment in terms of the amount of time we've got to draw data from that this thing is being used in humans. There were no animal trials, not the ones you would normally expect. There were no, human trials for at least a few years. I mean, the clinical trial, the official Pfizer trial, is still going on, and it's being put back. It's not due now, I think, to finish until I think it's early 2024. Could be late 2023 or 2024. So, by definition, this is not a fully registered medical product with all the data that would imply, and to say otherwise is just not correct. And we were told that from the word go. And in fact, a number of us, we received our consent forms when we were the first wave as frontline workers to be offered the vaccine. In fact, we'd already been instructed that we were to have the vaccine, actually. And there in black and white was some statement, this vaccine's been tested to the same standards as every other vaccine. Well, no, it hasn't. I mean, that was a barefaced.
They knew that. How could you not know that?
Well, look, I think it slipped by a lot of people because of the use of the word vaccine.
Oh, right.
This is certainly.
Boy, that's easy then.
Doctors I've spoken to, have said exactly that. And in fact, some of my colleagues who
but where's their critical observation? Did they not do their own research? Or do you just assume everything's
Humans are basically good and trusting people.
right?
And if you don't have a precedent for this type of thing to be slipped past you, and you've already been not only scared, but you've been locked up, disempowered, and had this relentless barrage of fear.
You just want it over.
You do, absolutely, and you want to do the right thing, of course,
Yeah.
for your patients and to set an example in the community. But one of our strong things is that we have a responsibility not just to our individual patients, but actually to the community as a whole, and we should be acting as sentries or gatekeepers for what's going on, and to shout out if we see that there are problems. And even before the vaccine rollout in New Zealand, it was very clear that the injury rate, the reports of adverse effects, were off the chart already in other countries compared to what we've ever seen before.
Okay, well, then, again, same kind of question. The geniuses in the Ministry of Health and the politicians running the response, etc., have access, surely, to this information.
Well, again, you'd have to ask them.
No, I know, but
why
yeah,
they choose not to.
Well, what possible answers could there be?
Well, we'd just be speculating, and that's not fair on your listeners for me to
No,
speculate. But there is reasons, and there are a lot to do with psychology. There are a lot to do with finance, and I think a lot of people don't understand the vulnerability that nation states have to corporates under sort of the current WTO rules and the banking system. Things have changed a lot in the last sort of 10 years in favor of the rights of corporations that are allowed to have the same rights and freedoms as an individual. And so, New Zealand's a small country. Pfizer's huge.
Yeah.
So presumably there would be a major disadvantage. And we know from some other countries that they've had to offer up huge collateral to the drug companies providing the vaccines in the event that they renege on their deals. So we think there's a lot of fear around what might happen to the country.
So we went through that phase of being persuaded that this was going to be a good thing and this is going to get us out of this pandemic situation, and people bought in and did the good thing. And I think most people were good-natured. I don't think they're that stupid, but they did want to do the right thing. I saw that. I'm sure you saw that. But then things tightened even more. Now you're having your movement inhibited, or you're having your job, facing a job loss, career loss. They don't care that you've got kids and mortgage to pay. They don't give a damn. Obviously, right? They didn't care. In fact, they thought, that's your punishment. You deserve that. So what happened? How do you think, from your observation of all of this going along, how did we get into that hardening of the heart situation, do you think?
And that's such an important question, Paul. You don't have to look very far back in history to see the same thing happening over and over again, all the way through the 20th century. Previously, sort of functional societies just suddenly caved, and then you have a totalitarian, iron-fisted, cold-hearted regime that actually saw the death of over 100 million people at the hands of their own governments in the 20th century. Now, we'll think, it'll never happen here. It could never happen here. But human psychology is the same the world over. And there are always people who are immune to the suffering of others and who believe that they know best, and the rest of us can just get stuffed at the feet of some agenda, some ideology. I don't know. I honestly don't. But I know that human psychology is vulnerable to being played. And I think that we've all been played with a military-grade psychological operation that has seen us, dance to the tunes that we've been given. And your point about cruelty, as doctors, it is indisputable to us that there are injured people from the vaccine, and there are people that have lost their lives. There is no doubt about that.
Avoiding that, want to get onto that.
Well, the point here is that the way these people have been treated, the ability to get an exemption when you've plainly suffered a significant adverse effect after your first or second jab, they're just not given. There is a cruel and hard-hearted, black and white approach that speaks volumes, I think, and it tells us that we're in a different, we're on a different planet now.
Because that's kind of evil.
That might be one interpretation.
Well, it's mine.
Yeah.
It comes to mind. Because it's brutal. You must have to have blocked out everything else in your thinking and be so focused on this one thing, getting back to that word, that you're so possessed by it that you don't care what happens to anyone that disagrees with you. They can die as far as you're concerned.
But isn't that what ideology and dogma does to people? You know, they become,
to that level.
Well, as I say, 100 million people plus. You know,
why don't you talked about exemptions for people who've been injured. Why would they be so ball-breaking about that?
That's a really good question because, you know, we know that you know, there are other changes being mooted in the way that we live. There are a move towards a, you know, centralized digital currency and, you know, the Internet of Things and the sort of the fifth generation technology, wireless technology, you know, has huge potential to change the way that we live and actually to limit the way we live too. You know, and in order to sort of to do that, you've got to get people signed into it. And I wonder whether, you know, it's not about the vaccines.
It's a sign.
Because if it was, you could easily build into an electronic system the ability for people to have exemptions. But given that so many people are getting cardiac inflammation, neurological disorders, you know, and things that may well be with them for you know, a long time, many of which actually ACC have been turning down, where there's been a recent sudden change of heart, which is interesting.
Oh, really?
Which we could talk about if you like.
No, we can't. But there'd be a strain on the budget after a certain level.
Absolutely. You know, it's already, we were already struggling. Of course, we know that with the health budget before COVID came along. But I don't think that they anticipated the extent of vaccine injury and deaths that they would see. I really don't. And about halfway through last year, a guy called Byron Bridle, who makes vaccines for a living, you know, he said, "Look, we've got it wrong. We've made a real mistake about the bit of the virus that we've chosen, the spike protein, to get the body to make for itself, because that's actually the disease-causing part of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. You know, we've just made a mistake, so we should recognize that, stop, and reverse tracks." So that's when his career started to go down the tubes.
Right.
But he was just trying to give a warning.
So anyone who's going to talk in the face of this is probably a gone burger, really, even now?
Well, I mean, it's you know, it's very easy to chuck these labels around, you know, conspiracy theorists and
I hear it all the time.
as a way of just diminishing somebody who says something that makes you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the point about ACC is that there are some, you know, really angry and quite well resourced people who've been injured by the vaccine, who've actually been turned down. And the thing about ACC, it provides protection or a liability protection for the health providers,
right?
Because the no fault compensation sort of umbrella that the ACC insurance gives means that you don't have to sue somebody who's injured you because you can get compensation. But if you get turned down for compensation and ACC does not register your vaccine injury, that means that you actually have the right to take a private prosecution and to start getting
this is what's happening now.
And I have a feeling that there's been a recognition of this because, you know, providers have been getting letters from ACC saying, you know, don't expect that a lot of these cases are going to be accepted because it's quite a high standard to prove a vaccine injury. And it is. But there's been a change now, and I think that's probably what's going on.
I've had 3 friends die in the last 2 months.
3 friends?
Die.
Oh, God.
The last 3 months. Thank you. 49, 71, and 50. Most recent, 50, very good mate, was in great health, it seemed. He really was. And he looked after himself. And I knew what he did. Now, that may be a coincidence that happens in a life. It's never happened before for me, and maybe we get to probably similar age range. We get to this stage in life, and we got to be a bit of that.
Yeah, well, look, those of us that have been working,
it makes me start to think.
It should.
So
we know this isn't normal, Paul. There's nothing normal about the extent of younger people who are dying.
What is the scale of it?
insurance companies are the places to really get the hard truth, because they are warning their investors ahead of time, because they get prosecuted if they don't, about significant changes in their business or their outlook. And there are some really big insurance companies that have come out, one in Germany, one in fact, two now in the States, that are reporting between 20 and 40% increase in all-cause mortality or death rates in the working age group. So this is basically 22 to 50. In fact, the CDC itself looked at some figures, and they found that between 24 and 49, there was a 70%, 74% increase. Now, 20% might not sound a lot, but it's huge, actually, for what are called standardized mortality rates, because, it's very consistent, who dies of what from year to year. There can be a variation, week to week or month to month. Obviously, you see more people dying in the colder months.
Yeah.
And generally, most people who die are expected to die. They're elderly. They've got a terminal disease.
It's no big surprise.
Yeah. But what is different is the number of young people who are dying in their sleep, dropping dead, and within 1, 2, 3 days, 7 days of a vaccine, it is sticking out like a sore thumb. And you can politic this as much as you want and ignore it, but more and more people are know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody to whom this has happened, and for every one unexplained sudden death in a previously well person, there are X number of 10 to 100 times injuries as well that, again, you would not expect to happen. Some people are wandering around, as a volcano waiting to blow. They've got all the risk factors for Africa, but many aren't. And as doctors that have worked in their communities for decades, me and my colleagues, we have no doubt that there is something really bad going on. And we talk a lot about the elephant in the room, and the emperor has no clothes. And these parables, have stood the test of time because they reflect elements of human psychology.
Right, they don't go away.
Allow us to use denial and obfuscation and things to reject unpleasant thoughts. And the worst thing that can happen to a human is that they can be, shamed for making a mistake.
Yeah, and
people will go to the ends of the earth to reject that.
Big time, we've seen that. Again, I sort of recognise news patterns because I've been in it so long. And we're pattern recognition machines, ultimately, aren't we?
We are. Yep.
One thing I've noticed too, and this is what I wonder about the safety of things now, is that there have been a lot of car crashes where people have driven off the road. They haven't involved other cars. In my experience of reporting endless car accidents, it's usually 2 vehicles involved. You don't just drive off into the lake. I've noticed that recently. Also, I've seen quite a bit of debate coming out of the States regards very crucial workers like airline pilots. Do we want to be in a plane where the guy falls on the controls at 100 feet in a 60-knot nor'wester coming into Wellington?
Of course we don't.
So why are we willing to, I could be wrong, I'm barking up the wrong tree, but why are we willing to take these risks and impose them on people?
Well, I think many of us don't realise it's not put in that way to us, and we don't realise that we are taking those risks. But if regulators are, then there is clearly something else going on. There is something much bigger at play. There has to be.
Because it's hard to explain it any other way, right?
Yeah, the most safety conscious industry on the planet.
Yeah, for good reason.
And they are, lowering the bar left, right, and centre for monitoring people that have been vaccinated.
And those who are having trouble will not come forward because they'll lose in this case, they'll lose their medical, they'll lose their career.
There are many pilots that say that.
There
are many pilots that say that. And there have been some
fairly
high
jeopardy,
profile,
potentially.
near disasters already.
Yeah, there's a few in America. I follow that quite closely. I want to get on to the messaging, because I find this fascinating. The persuasion. And you mentioned military grade, I think, when we were talking before. There does seem to be, and they're smart people, they know what they're doing. There seems to be, this hasn't been a random set of messages, it seems to me. It's been too anticipatorial. Is that the word? It's kind of like they've anticipated, whoever they are, the next move, and are kind of ahead of where the psychology is about to be. sort of 1 or 2 steps ahead. And that speaks to me of a systematic, military grade approach to manipulating psychology. Is that what you think?
It's what I think personally, because there is such a sort of lockstep synchrony with what's happened in other countries. And that might not be the explanation, but there's an explanation somewhere for the facts that we see, which is in the face of overwhelming evidence of harm, an unprecedented amount of harm from this medical product that we've never seen before. They're still barreling on.
Well, they're saying get boosted, and
it's desperately sad.
correct me if I'm wrong. This original vaccine is not even made for variants, and we're getting hit with all sorts of variants, and they're saying getting boosted. But hang on, does it work? And if it doesn't against these, why are you pushing it? Is that a psychological operation?
Well, again, you just have to try and work out for yourself, what the blanks are.
Yeah.
But the very fact of all these variants was predicted if you vaccinate when there is lots of virus around. We never wait to see if there's going to be a flu epidemic in any particular winter and then start vaccinating, because that's how you encourage mutation of the virus. You do it in the autumn, basically. March, April, we're starting to think about the flu vaccine campaigns, and we may not see it till sort of September in some years. So if you start raising antibodies to a virus that's already in the population, you're going to see variants. And the natural history of respiratory virus pathogens has always been, they come and they burn through the population and they're gone 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, because they've infected the vulnerable, and people have developed their immunity, and then it can't jump between people anymore. And what we've seen is the succession of variants that each of them have arisen in a country that was starting to roll out its vaccine. And in fact, if you look at almost every country where there are statistics, you see the waves of COVID, the really significant ones, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, matching the vaccine programs. And that's, you can come up with any explanation you like, and you can belittle people who mention it, but that's the emperor has no clothes thing. You can look at the data and you can ignore it, or you can try and understand it and produce an explanation. And it may be unpalatable for people in power, but that doesn't change what the data says.
And they're still going to deal with it. There will be consequences from this. There's no doubt about it. There's got to be. There'll be fallout. I don't know what it'll be, but I sense it's there. Have you ever been interviewed like this on a mainstream media channel?
Oh, never. I mean, we've been hoping to. And
what happens?
We've asked for debates as well.
And?
No one takes us up.
Why?
And that's been true. Well, you have to ask them, Paul.
No, but you've been in the game a bit. You must have a gut as to why that is, because normally that's what the media is there. You're supposed to have open discussion about things, and okay, the best ideas win, the strongest debater wins, whatever. But you do it, and that's what the whole fundamental tenet of journalism, current affairs, has always been. Certainly with the people I used to work with in newsrooms, and science,
and it's gone. It's been eradicated.
So what's the media's part of this? Because we've got a slick psychological operation going somewhere. By who, I don't know. But you mentioned lockstep. There seems to be a lockstep too with media. They are obeying or omitting a lot of what should be the coverage. And now you must have done some thinking about that.
Yep. I mean, I think, but it's speculation, and it's one of the things that somebody like me, is acutely sensitive to, having it turned against me.
Yeah.
That doesn't stop me having my views.
No.
But it's not always.
But it's a reasonable question to ask.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. Well, I'm sure some of your listeners or people that ring in will have a variety of views on that. But you can't ignore or pretend that history didn't happen. And a good example is, I can't remember the name of it now, but in the early 30s, a German newspaper appeared whose sole job was to criticize the Jews and to play their part in turning the population gradually against this group of people who, over a number of years became demonized and dehumanized. So that then, when the atrocities really started happening, nobody batted an eyelid.
They were desensitized
but
to
it
a
took
level.
a number of years
Yeah.
to get to that place. So it has happened before. So we can't pretend that it might not be happening now, or that it won't happen in the future. It's certainly a possibility, and people need to be awake to that. You know, there's always been a streak, an instinct for totalitarianism that's run through humanity, and some people just lack the capacity to relate to the suffering of other people. They're just born without something that the rest of us have, and we don't spot to them as if they're us. So we don't think
to do is people drop off. So if they start playing around with my connection and start as they're doing, then people tend to drop off my lives, and I guess that's the purpose. So there's still a few minutes, so hopefully I don't have to restart myself. So things seem to be okay at the moment, but as soon as I start playing, yeah, I can see it coming in and out. So JJ says they're scrambling to hide the truth. Gosh, there's been so many comments. Here we go again. It's lagging big time. I've rung up my provider to ensure that the internet connection is doing okay, and they said yes, the internet connection is fine. And I've got Chorus coming around tomorrow to make sure that our fibre is connected tomorrow. So I'm just trying to eliminate, I guess, any connection issues, because this is how we're getting our message out, whānau? So I'm going to try and share Dr. Matt's kōrero again. Amazing human being, and I have the utmost respect for Dr. Matt. And but we'll, let's see if we can get to the end of this video. Great interview. What do you think? Okay, I'm going to share again. Oh, kia ora, Danny and Sarah. They said, hi, Freedom Family. The bank account for Kingdom Advances is for Australia. Oh, we are trying to organise a New Zealand account. So this is in regards to what's happening in Tokelau. So if you can go on to Danny and Sarah Pelacio Facebook page, and they will keep you up to date. They are the whānau that I've been I did a live in regards to whānau being locked down. This is a few couple of months ago now, and so Danny has just come back on. But anyway, Danny will keep us updated, Kei te pai, Danny, and Chantal Baker as well as Liz Gunn are keeping us updated. Remember, these are the New Zealand citizens, and my internet connection is going to wee wawa. So I'm going to go back to Dr. Shelton's kōrero because we don't want to miss it. Ka pai. If it's going to let me share it all. I don't know if it's going to let me share. What I might do, whānau, is sorry, whānau. Every time I try and play it, the actual StreamYard, and I don't know if StreamYard is all part of these big technocrats and control and are part of the censorship as well. But I'm not happy with them, and I certainly will not be giving them any more of my money once my time runs out with them. Shocking. But what I'll do is, rather than try and connect Dr. Matt's video, I'm gonna post the link up so you can watch it. We got up to about 46 minutes, and I will leave my kanohi here, and we'll just have to listen to the rest of it. It's still about another 8 minutes, whānau.
Right, so they can't help themselves. They just are who they are.
Yeah.
And these people can end up in positions of power and authority. And it's happened over and over. And many of us, we just want to know who the boss is and what the rules are. And if it all seems to make sense and we seem to get along, then we're happy.
This may be a big, I don't know if you've thought about this too much, but this may be a big problem for the nation. If this is found out to be an epic cluster B, all right, we'll know who is responsible. We know who made those decisions, who made those recommendations. Okay, we might not see a contract now, but we might see their contract. We should see their contract. I mean, we're paying the money. Nurses, doctors have injected people. Let's say there's a real downside. I mean, sending some to not a nice outcome. How do you deal with the accountability? Have you thought about that?
I try not to think about it because I'm an optimist, and I think this is, we're going to sort this out. The people will solve it.
Right.
Rather than later. But there are, lots of really good people who are just unwitting, I think, in this.
Do you think it's starting to give? Is it, the whole dam starting to creak and grow?
I do, actually. I do. Certainly at the freedom protests in Wellington, probably the majority of people that came up to talk to me, to share their stories, were people who actually had vaccine injuries. So they've been vaccinated.
Oh.
But they've woken up. And I just wanted to come back to this point I made about how you define vaccinated and unvaccinated. The reason that some of the data supposedly has shown that the unvaccinated are so much more vulnerable is that you're not considered fully vaccinated until maybe a couple of weeks after your first dose. And then after your second, again, you
So it's a technical tweak.
Oh, look, absolutely, but it can hide a huge amounts of harm and seem to lump it into the unvaccinated
and give
group.
a plausible deniability when being questioned.
But if you define it properly from the moment that jab goes in the arm, and look at what happens, actually the statistics flip.
Yeah.
And it does show that the unvaccinated actually are not big users of the health system and do not have poor outcomes.
We've got 6 minutes left. I saw a list the other day that I think was a part of a list or a database that has been set up by, I think, your organisation.
Oh, yes, yeah.
I almost tear up talking about this. I looked through there and there were dozens and dozens of names. 13, 17, 18 years, 21, 32, 55. Just went on and bloody on.
Yep. It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And we're not saying that the vaccine killed these people.
But something's up, man.
We're saying they died shortly following a vaccine, and they need to be investigated, because if there's a problem, how the hell are we going to know if people don't do their jobs and investigate properly? Mm. So the police have had this information.
What do they make of it?
Okay, so now they've stopped the Facebook Live. Oh gosh, can't win with the connection, eh? But truth hurts, and they're playing with mine. I've lost over half of yous, and that's the expectation, eh? When they play around with your connection, they know you're going to have half the people drop off because people get hoha with the connection. But we just got to have patience, because the truth is coming through, whānau. And exactly what
they can't get their heads around it.
Oh, here it is, back on again. No, slow down. So when I rang up my,
I think,
well, here
we've had a couple of derisory responses.
This is what happened last night.
Most of the time, MedSafe and the police basically just ignore it. What the police said was, well, frankly, this is preposterous. We can't believe what you're saying. So they went and had a look, and they said, well, MedSafe has plenty of data to refute what you're saying. And the reason we've written is that they plainly don't have the data. There's 160, I think.
So anyway, whānau, I've put the link up there. And this was the crucial parts of the video. So Watch the Water with Dr. Brian Artis. And it was the crucial part where he was talking about water being used as the vehicle you know, because we're all talking about the three waters, right, and how
I think,
the government wants to
deaths that have
nationalise
been
it.
reported to meds post-vaccination. We've got around about 500 names, and we only pulled 160 of the younger ones, predominantly, that we felt, you know, made a really strong case for proper.
So I'll just talk in between, as I was doing last night, and saying to whānau, have patience, because they're playing around with my algorithms. You saw what Chantal Baker said, and that there has to be a red flag. I mean, more and more people are aware of vaccine injuries and people that have died. To even my connection with you, whether or not it's StreamYard, but apparently
Investigation,
my provider
just in
said
case.
that my connection's
And
okay.
of the 160 that MedSafe have,
And these are the crucial
through the
points.
CALM system, they're saying 48 of those don't have enough information to investigate, so they're just not investigating. Well, they should go and get the information. That's what they're there for, and they could use the police to do that. So,
That's right. And just remember that it's the University of Otago who is
part of this, if they just
sponsored
ignore
by Bill
inconvenient
Gates,
information, and
who monitor CALM, who are the ones that manage the CALM database.
and don't respond to us,
Yeah. So what was it?
and our annoying questions, then the questions will go away. But they're not going to, because we have an obligation. No matter what happens to us personally, you know, we're all, you know, there's only one way we can proceed, and that's forward, trying to figure out what the truth is and telling it to people, and not worrying about, you know, where the chips will fall. It's not.
Yeah. So he's absolutely right. Those of us that are courageous enough.
Not our job to control people's reactions to unpleasant information, but we've got to get the people who we pay to regulate and protect us to do their jobs. That's all we've ever asked for.
Meantime, you've got families who are going, what the hell happened here? And they're going to get angry, aren't they, at some point?
Well, it's part of the normal grieving process to go through that process. But
here's a question.
But it's much more complicated than that, though, because it's in an environment where there's already so much fear. And I think that for a lot of these families and partners, you know, they're on their knees psychologically. They've had the worst thing that can happen to a human being, which is to lose a loved one, or, you know, a young person.
Especially.
And now we're saying, you know, you have to stand up and risk losing your peer group, losing your friends, losing your family.
Oh, that's such a terrible
by asking hard questions. If you know that most of your people, your peers, wouldn't support you in doing that, people can't go there. You know, they just know that they need the people around them, and they're not going to rock the boat. Maybe till later on. I think that's one of the explanations.
Yeah, it is difficult for whānau. I have whānau that support me. I have whānau that sort of sit on the fence, and I have whānau that support vaccination, and it is what it is. And it's just I've got a big waha. My whānau tend to choose not to rock the boat or debate, and they know that I've got a lot more information and done a lot more research than they've ever done. So with the loss of our father, it certainly has been an eye-opener, not just for our whānau, but our hapu and our iwi. And like I say, again, it took me out. So there definitely is a connection problem. So Chorus will be in tomorrow to make sure there's no issues with the wiring.
I'm sure there are
outside.
others, and there are people actually who are trying to get, they're appealing the coroner's reports, and they're trying to get medical information. They're asking questions. So the dam will break. It has to.
This hour's gone so quick. We've got about a minute left. How long do you think this is going to run?
I don't know. It's one of the most enabling responses to any question for a doctor to be able to give, actually, which is I don't know, because there's a lot of stuff we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see our country putting up for too much longer with restrictions on our freedom being probably put in danger from this medical treatment without calling for accountability and starting to resist. And there's a steady stream of very smart voices, who are getting a wider and wider audience for their writings and things. And people are waking up to the bigger picture, because I think there has to be one, because COVID-19 can't continue to be the world's leading cause of coincidences. We're expected to swallow so much as just being a coincidence. And any one of these things on their own you could maybe dismiss, but put it all together, and there's some bad stuff happening.
Dr. Matt Shelton of NZD SOS, thank you for coming in.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
And let's see what happens.
Well, you watch, everything will settle down now, because when we were watching Dr. Brian Artis' interview on Watch the Water, it was when he was talking about they were starting to test their water, and so what was happening, they would do the regulators would do PCR tests, this is in the US, and then predict that there was going to be an outbreak, and there was an outbreak, and then what they'd do is they'd test the drinking water, and they found COVID-19. They'd used the rat test and found COVID-19 in their drinking water. So there's some sinister stuff happening, and I'm just sorry. So I am trying to sort out if there are any connection problems, and apparently my provider said no, and so now we're looking at whether the wiring, the fiber, there's any damage there. So we've got Chorus coming tomorrow to check our broadband fiber, or fast broadband fiber, that a number of houses are connected to just make sure that what's been happening to my videos and my lives is not the provider or not the owner of the actual fiber itself. So the provider says everything is honky-dory, and we'll check out tomorrow to see if the fiber is a problem, the wires that connect to our homes. And if that is honky-dory, then I know that I've been that either the algorithms or bots or a human being is tattooing with my lives. And you know what? To me, that's a compliment, because to me, they all, there's this old saying, you don't kick a dead dog, right? You don't kick a dead dog. But anyway, just I've got the link there if you want to go through in your own time without all the interruptions. If you want to just go, it's a brilliant interview, like Dr. Brian Artis yesterday. Go in and watch the water. That's a brilliant interview if you got the time to sit there and just go through it with a cup of coffee or something a bit stronger. Some of you might need something a bit stronger, but Dr. Matt Shelton, who I've met personally, he's a colleague of mine as well. An amazing human being. We've just got some amazing human beings. Sue Gray, another amazing leader, amazing human being in the freedom space. For me, what's important is that my mokopuna will look back on this time and know that her nanny did the utmost, what she could possibly do to make a difference. He talked about whānau who have lost whānau to vaccine injury, getting angry, and I'm at that angry phase. And having my husband said be toe, but I said that anger fuels me. what's happened to my father, I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. The way that he suffered even, and, you know, just, I'm still going through the grieving process, and I think about, like, you know, all the different, you know, like, lawyers have been guiding me. You have these options. You can do this, and this in regards to what happened to your father. Even if he, you know, when people were saying, "Oh, did your father get an autopsy?" and I just couldn't do that to my papa. Seriously, I sorry. I just couldn't do that to my beautiful father. I couldn't do that to my mama, and I couldn't do that to my siblings. Oh gosh, I've been pretty strong to this point, but I know I'm still in the grieving process. But he's motivated me. I am running for local government, and people have said to me, "Why are you running for local government?" Well, actually, my training, my background is local government, RMA, and Māori resource management. That's what my master's in law is about. Sorry for shedding a tear or two, but yeah, just talking about autopsies. Sort of, yeah, seeing my papa, couldn't do that to him. Here's what's important, and this is where the three waters are at with me. I'm glad that Māori, and because I have and will always be a Māori activist or pro Māori. That's who I am. Who am I? I'm Māori, and we've been oppressed in the history. If we look back, my tupuna has experienced what we're experiencing now. And so been there, done that. My tupuna have, and we're in a war. And you know, just what Matt Shelton had to say. I mean, he says it in such a calming, professional manner. But he's seen firsthand the harm. He's seen firsthand the harm, and so have I. I've seen firsthand, not just with my own whānau, but with others that I've supported over the last wee while, and continue to support in this space. And there's so many of us. And he said people now are hearing of vaccine injuries. People now know of people that have died of vaccine injuries. But the information that Dr. Matt Shover, see, notice that our connection has come right now. Eh? No interruptions. And I've lost over half of you. Maybe because it's a long live. But, you know, certainly know that I've been dicked around in regards to Facebook, even StreamYard, and with the government possibly, and the algorithms and the bots. Things that stood out to me about what Dr. Matt said is that over the last 10 years, we are now living in a different world. And that there are more rights to being lavished out to corporations by governments than there have been to the people that they govern. And that's what we have to change. And don't think, and I'm serious about this, whānau, if you want change, do not vote National in. There has to be a third way. And I'm part of that third way. And whānau, we've got to make a difference. We only have one opportunity, because Dr. Shelton also spoke about you know, digital ID, and basically what he was implying is that we're heading towards a social credit system where the minority or an elite few will control the masses, all of us, and that this hasn't been about vaccination. He said it's not even a vaccination, it's not a traditional vaccination. We're in an experimental phase, and we've known that, right? MedSafe, you know, there have been court cases, and how the judges are torn between what the government says. You know, the from a, you know, law 101, there's separation of powers, and once the judiciary is influenced by politicians, then again that's another erosion of our democracy. And that's what Dr. Shelton was saying, is that judges are torn. They shouldn't be torn. They should look at the evidence in front of them. That's their job. And also that those regulators that are paid to protect us need to do their job as well. And he says, the dam, there's a massive crack in the dam, and that dam is going to break. The question is, when it comes to elections in 2023, who are you going to put in power? Because here's the thing, every single one of those politicians, 120 of them, bar at the end, there was a couple, David Seymour and Matt, oh crikey, I've forgotten his name. Anyway, yes, they walked among the people, but they haven't been as outspoken as the freedom fighters, right? They've been sort of tinkering in the middle somewhere. So and there was one stage where, oh, what was his name? What's his name, Fano? My brain's really tired. And Matt. Anyway, he was a National Party MP. I'll just wait for someone to bring it up. King. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you. Danny said we'll be voting from Australia. The beauty is when you are voting from Australia, you can choose your electorate. This is the beauty. You can choose your electorate. So when that opportunity happens, yes, we need all our whānau from Australia to put a special vote in, and hopefully, thank you, whānau. Oh my gosh, Matt King. Yeah, I mean, he did come amongst the people down in the occupation, and he's no longer there. He set up his own party, and good on him. The thing is, I don't want to knock the guy. Good on him, but he actually said he's an ex-cop. Raises red flags for me from a Māori perspective, but he's an ex-cop, and he said that he hasn't witnessed any corruption in Wellington, and to me that's quite naive. That's very naive. I'm aware and have experienced corruption even in the police force. So, and I've experienced that personally, me and my whānau. But that's a whole different taki. But ACC. So here's the interesting one, because ACC received claims which they turned down, right? And so if you put a claim in and you're turned down, technically that allows you to take a case out, right? That allows here we go. There's a bit of lagging. Sorry, whānau. So ACC Oh my gosh, this is shocking. It totally took me out. Sorry, whānau. I have absolutely no control over it. And then it lets me come back in again. Shocking. Shocking. So my provider said there's no issues with connections, and we've just got to see if something's happening with my fibre. But I've got that organised for tomorrow because this is my tool. And this is the way that I communicate with you. So I did put a message up to say I was totally taken out, and then the next minute it's back on again. And by doing that, again, I've lost half of what I lost half prior, and they know I will slowly but surely lose viewership, and I apologise for that. So anyway, whānau, where was I? I was just talking about ACC, and I was talking about insurance companies and just some of the data that Dr. Shelton was sharing with us. And then he talks about, he used the word parables, that the denial and the rejection of actual science and data. And he said, that's what it's about, scientists debating, and that the platform was the first, because technically the platform, Sean Plunkett, I know Sean Plunkett personally. I'm hoping at some stage he might want to interview me. We'll see. But anyway, technically I see them as a mainstream media platform using social media, but these are all mainstream media journalists, and they're questioning their own colleagues, and they're questioning, basically we're dealing with corruption. And isn't it interesting that I seen on Facebook, and because I messaged you on my phone, and I just seen a New Zealand Herald photo of the PM and her ministers and all these people, about 70 of them, bar one, wearing not wearing masks. Now she went around the world not wearing masks, and she's getting a bit of flack about it. And I just say to people, use your common sense in regards to mask wearing. I mean, when I was around my father, I wore a mask. He was very vulnerable, very sick. And if any of us are sick around my husband, we will wear masks because we see that as a way of protecting them, not so much protecting us. So, to me, that's an individual choice. I do it because I don't want to spread anything that I have to any whānau that are vulnerable. So, it was just, I think Dr. Brian Ardis, Watch the Water, must watch again, whānau, and it doesn't hurt for you to watch these videos more than once. It doesn't hurt to watch them, because what you're doing is you're educating and informing yourself, and then you can be an advocate out there in your community, advocating on behalf of and educating more and more of our whānau. You're going to get rebuttals. But if you've got the data and the information, go on to MedSafe. MedSafe is another good data set. And like I said, Dr. Shelton spoke about calm. I'm looking sideways at the University of Otago now. I would even go as far as say that's a university I would not want any of my mokopuna to attend. I would have strong views about them attending the University of Otago, because to me, the part of that propaganda, the part of that machinery. CALM is managed by the University of Otago, as well as Bill Gates funds that university. So there's too much nepotism, as far as I'm concerned, with the narrative, the propaganda, and the big pharma and the funders. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, they're not objective. And if I recall, because I've sort of been in a different way to a space, but if I recall, I think Michael Baker has something to do with the University of Otago. Please quote me. Please don't quote me. And please let me know if I've got that information wrong, so if someone can let me know. Thank you all. There's just so many of you that have come on tonight. And you know, I've been told that people said that they've missed my live. So you might get hoha with me now because I might be on too many times. Know that I am going to run for Hamilton City Council. I fought really hard for the Māori constituent seats. So I certainly will be putting my name up there. Watch this space. Also, and the reason why, like I said earlier before I was interrupted by the disconnection, is that I have a local, so I hold a master's in law, Māori resource management and the law. So that's my background. Been working in that space since I left law school in the early 2000s. Been out of law school for, nearly 2 decades now. So it's been a while, but I moved into the criminal justice space because whānau took me into that space, and it is what it is. So I'm an advocate in that space as well. And I wrote the Māori Party's justice policy. And I'm not saying I'm an expert in that space, but I'm very, very passionate about that area. Now, in regards to local government, I have strong views about local government. I believe that too much power is shifted to central government, and I believe that slowly but surely local communities have been disempowered, and I want to see a decentralisation of power back to the communities. Here's the reason why I work in that local community space, and I will fight hard to ensure that our assets stay within the community, and that, because here's the thing, with so many different councils, right, and regional councils, 76 all up, I think. Oh gosh, don't quote me on the numbers either, around that much. I'm talking regional and district and city councils, right? Now, that, you know, and you can, and a lot of them are independents as well, which is a good thing, because when you're an independent politician, you know, basically if you lie, you're gone. And if you don't do what you promised to do, and people elected you on what you said, then you're gone. Whereas with central government, you've got these parties, and you're bound by towing the party line, and then you can get you can get higher on the list depending on where you stand, your mana within your own party, te mea. But what that says is that the party dynamics and the party politics is actually more important than the people that they're representing. So I see the logic around parties. I belong to a party. I see the logic around it in regards to sharing resources. It's not easy. It's not easy to run at that central government level. We have the 5% threshold, and let's see what comes out of the wash with the electoral review. And yeah, we'll see what's going to happen in the future. Do they drop that threshold? And you know, there are recommendations that it should be dropped. I think, for democracy's sake, there should be no threshold, that no vote should be wasted. So, you know, there's all these things to consider, let alone, and we've got to ask ourselves, how did we get to this point? We got ourselves there. We only but have ourselves to blame, and only we can get ourselves out of it. Because, you know, we vote for the people who are going to act on our behalf. And if they don't, we get rid of them. And so there's been a shift, and there's a lot more support for the freedom fighters. We're not so much the conspiracy theorists anymore. Actually, we're now being seen to take the lead, and the paradigms are shifting. The paradigms are shifting, not just here in Aotearoa, but around the world. My concern is around totalitarianism and around being, turning sovereign countries into dictatorships, where a small group, a handful of people, want to control the world, basically. Would I have ever talked about a new world order? I don't even see it as a new world order. What I see is centralization of power around the world, like centralization of power in Wellington. So, let's start. And not only that, you hear the terminology, that the price of living has gone up. It's not the price of living that has gone up, is that we are living below the poverty line. So let's start shifting some of their terms. Once you start saying people are living, like 70% of New Zealanders are living below the poverty line, that's a concern. I mean, I'm just throwing out that number. I don't know what it is, but I do know we're all struggling. When you say, the price of living has gone up, it doesn't actually give you a clear picture, does it? So, we've just got to call things out for what they are. This has been such a long life, and I've only got a handful of views on now, but you're still commenting. Thank you all. I can't go through all the names because there's so many of yous, but I really, really do appreciate you tuning in, and sorry for the long life, but I guess I've got a few weeks and months to make up for, and I'm sure you don't mind. So anyway, I'm going to say good night now. Thank you all for listening in. Love you all. Kia pai tō pō, pō Māori, ka kite.